Hello and welcome to Sunday. So last time we had Jason waking up, having a lovely foraging time with Tyler, and then afterwards discovering how his whole kitchen and living room is transformed into a greeting room, theater room, new kitchen, oh my god, amazing kitchen, and gaming area. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I will admit, writing that was a lot of wish fulfillment. Like, if I could have that, oh my god, that would be so much fun. Anyway, so at the end we hear a ding ding, and so I am going to read the tail end of chapter 40, and then we're going to pick up on chapter 41. And just to let everybody know, so this next scene is going to play out over 3 chapters. So there will be endings that will leave you like, where's the rest? But anyway, that's the way it is. Okay. All right. Well, if someone rings your door, it's best to go and see what they want. I opened the house front door wide and stepped outside. We were quickly spotted, and all eyes turned to watch us as we went down the front steps and walked up the front walkway. We reached the group, but made sure to stay on our side of the shield. Just because they weren't actively attacking us didn't mean we were safe. "Can I help you?" I asked politely. "My name is Ken Hill, and I'm here with my school for the exchange of reconciliation." The man in the middle looked serious, but he also matched my politeness. "I wish to speak with your master." All right, chapter 41, Exchange of Reconciliation. I thought about telling him I didn't have a master. I was pretty sure he wanted to talk to Sandy, so I just let it go. This situation would have thrown me a bit before, but after being at the gathering for a week, it just felt normal. I gave him a bow and said I would go and let her know he was here. I was just turning to leave when Sandy, John, and Annabeth exited the house and came towards us. Once she arrived, I quickly introduced them to each other. "Sandy, this is Ken Hill, and he has arrived with his school for an exchange of reconciliation. Mr. Hill, this is Sandy Felton. She is the head of our household." My part in this was done, so I stepped back and out of the way. Sandy could take it from here. Ken was looking at Sandy, but everybody else was looking at John. He stood behind her in a protective stance. His 7-foot-tall mountain frame loomed over everyone and let them know without saying a word that if they messed with Sandy, it would be the last thing they ever did. I loved Sandy, of course, but even I found him intimidating. "Hello, Mr. Hill," Sandy said politely. "Thank you for coming to Louisville and visiting our house. May I ask where your school is located?" "We are from the north side of Cincinnati," he replied, "up by the Kenwood Mall area. We chartered a couple of buses for the trip, as trying to caravan that many cars would be difficult. The trip here only took about 2 hours, and we decided to stop at the park since it is so convenient." Well, that certainly explained why everyone was approaching from the park. The sidewalk outside the house was crowded, and people were still arriving. "Might I ask how many guests you brought with you today?" Sandy asked. Her eyes darted over the crowd, trying to get a feel for what she was dealing with. "I have a little over 100 students with me today," Ken replied. "Not everyone from my school could make it, of course, and some students needed to stay at our headquarters and make sure everything continued to run smoothly. However, there are students enough here for our purpose today, including everyone that was emotionally and physically involved in the attack." Sandy nodded politely, but she seemed a little lost. I recalled something being mentioned about an exchange of reconciliation at the gathering, but I didn't remember that much about it. Hopefully Sandy knew what that was, as she had been taking notes. "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Hill," Sandy continued. I know what an exchange of reconciliation is, but I am unsure of how it applies to us currently. I was unaware of your arrival, and so I'm not prepared for guests as what I would like to be. If you would be so kind, please enlighten my house as to your purpose, and then we can proceed appropriately. I noticed that Sandy wasn't standing too close to the shield, and she also hadn't invited them inside. Hang on. Okay. I'm sorry, we had Benjamin was about ready to bring the whole thing down. Okay, I noticed that Sandy wasn't standing too close to the shield, and she also hadn't invited them inside. It would be the polite thing to do, as our group was now spilling out onto the street. But we didn't know these mages, and we didn't know what their intentions were. I thought maybe Sandy had missed a message again, but Ken had a quick conversation with a few of his people, and it quickly became clear that nobody had sent a letter explaining their arrival. Apparently a letter had been drafted, but it was still in Cincinnati waiting for his approval. I thought it was funny that even older mages with established schools had organizational issues. I guess people are the same no matter how old they get. When Ken turned back to us, he was less formal and more apologetic. I was not aware that we were showing up unannounced. Your caution, of course, is much more understandable given the recent turn of events. I had hoped that you would be aware of our arrival and prepared for the reconciliation. I will explain, and hopefully we can still achieve our purpose today. Sandy smiled graciously and nodded for him to continue. John continued to glower at them from behind her, and Annabeth joined me and Tyler on the side. She didn't say anything, but she grabbed my hand and gave it a quick squeeze of support. As you no doubt know, the house is not thought of in the highest regard by the rest of the supernatural community, Ken said regretfully. As such, when the Louisville mages approached our school and asked for our help in relocating a new house, we agreed. I'm sorry to say that we were told many stories about your house, stories that we have since come to learn were false. I won't go into specifics, but just know that Isabel crafted tales that were both believable and yet bad for your reputation. I could believe that. Isabel was evil, but she was also crafty. I'm sure her gossip about us had been too sweet to resist. We put the matter to a vote, and it was decided that any member of our house that wanted to could travel to Louisville and stand with the Louisville mages as a show of force. And that was all it was supposed to be. A show of force. When they arrived, they were told more lies, armed with catapults and wands, and included on the battle of your house. He paused and got a little emotional. During that battle, 2 of our members were crushed and killed. Several more of them were injured, 6 of them seriously. As you can imagine, there have been a lot of emotions stemming from that night. We are ashamed that we were fooled into participating. We are angry at the loss of our fellow mages, and a few of us are bitter at being defeated. Having severely injured mages to care for also makes sure that what happens remains fresh in our minds. I saw the mages around him nodding at his words. He was their teacher, and he was speaking for them. That is why we thought to invoke the exchange of reconciliation between our 2 schools. We obviously have a lot to work through on our side. I'm sure there's an equal amount of upset to work through on yours. We hope that we will end today with an understanding of each other. While I doubt that one day together could make us allies, I'm hopeful that we might at least start heading in that direction. Sandy gave him a shallow bow. Thank you for your candor and all the thought you and your school have obviously put into this situation. Please allow me a moment to confer with the rest of my house. And allow me to confer with Bermuda real quick. Boo-boo! I've conferred with Bermuda, and he has his little mouse and his little long stick, and oh yeah, lots of fun. He was really enjoying himself. Okay, anyway, so sorry about that. Thank you for your candor and all your thought, and I'll confer with my house. Ken returned her bow, and then we all moved back towards the house so we could speak without being overheard. We huddled up and Annabeth asked the first question. So what is this exchange of reconciliation thing? She kept her voice soft so it didn't carry back to the mages on the sidewalk. I just learned about it at the gathering, Sandy replied softly. It's not something the houses do, but apparently it's very popular in the rest of the supernatural world. Basically, it's when two schools fight each other in a fairly safe environment. The idea is that both sides gain an understanding of each other. On the positive side, friendships could form between the participants. Everyone gains a bit of fighting experience, and the event ends with rainbows and sunshine. A more cynical way of looking at it is that the event lets the schools figure out who's the top dog. The school with the less strength knows not to antagonize the stronger school, and it saves lives by not having an all-out war. In this case, it would serve an additional purpose by allowing the members of this school that are angry and grieving to take out their emotions on us, and allow us to get out our emotions on them. Ken is hoping it will be cathartic for both sides and we can all start to heal. She paused thoughtfully. I guess I should start by asking, does anyone feel angry or upset by the attack on the house, specifically with this school from Cincinnati? I'm not angry, John rumbled. I don't even know who these people are. We had a fight, but it was with Isabel and she's gone. Now we just need to clean up the rest of the rotten mages and we can get on to other things. The rest of us nodded in agreement. So it sounds like we're not really getting anything out of this reconciliation, Sandy noted, other than the fact that it helps build our relationship with the neighboring school. That is one thing we're supposed to do as a house. We're supposed to be helpful and supportive to our supernatural neighbors. As long as they aren't attacking us or going rotten from stolen magic, John noted. Yes, Sandy agreed with a smile. Isabel and her rotten mages do not get the Good Neighbor Award. How safe is this reconciliation? Tyler asked. I think it would be worth participating if it isn't too dangerous. Training on the beach is great, but there is no substitute for sparring with another person, especially if they are from another school and will fight differently from what you are used to. I think it's pretty safe, Sandy replied. I'm sure there will be bumps and bruises and the possibility of more than that. It shouldn't be life-threatening, though, and nothing we can't heal. Here's the format. Both schools line up from the newest supernatural to the oldest. Then the two newest members of each school spar. The winner of that match then challenges the next oldest member. That keeps going until one school runs out of members. For the final match, the leaders of both schools fight. It's a good system because it ramps up the difficulty naturally, and it keeps a very powerful mage from fighting a new mage and severely injuring them. It's also nice because it gives most of the school a chance to compete and see how they do against somebody else at their power level. As for the fight itself, both of the fighters can yield at any time. There is an agreed upon referee, and they can also stop the fight at any time. The heads of both schools act as seconds for all the matches, and they can also call an end to the fight. Because there are so many ways of stopping a match, it rarely gets out of hand. That sounds like a good format, Tyler said, and we all agreed. So Jason is our youngest supernatural, and he will go first. Then Annabeth, then John. Sandy, you will only fight against Ken. Do I have that right? Yes, Sandy nodded. That sounds right. Tyler, since you are the only person who isn't part of either house or school, would you agree to be the referee? Tyler nodded, but Annabeth spoke up. Are we doing this? Are we doing this exchange of reconciliation? We all looked at each other. I'm agreeable if you both are, Sandy said to me and Annabeth. Same here, John said. I know I can take care of any of them that get out of hand, and this sounds like a great way to get some actually fighting experience for you two, but I don't want either of you to do something you aren't ready for yet. I looked at Annabeth. What do you think? For the record, I don't like hurting people, she said firmly. However, this seems like a fairly safe setting. I would like to do it, but I want to suggest a small change to the rules. How about if Jason and I alternate matches? That way we both get as much experience as possible. We aren't that far apart in supernatural age after all, and we both seem to be competing at the same general level in the arena. Once we both lose a match, then John can take over and mop them up. I like it, John grinned. This is going to be fun. We all grinned back and then got our game face on as we returned to our side of the house shield. Sandy agreed to the exchange of reconciliation and went over the format with Ken so there wasn't any misunderstanding, and then negotiated the format change Annabeth had requested. Upon learning that we were both less than a year old, Ken quickly agreed to the adjustment. John had gone back to being a massive, menacing presence, so he was getting all the attention. They weren't worried about me and little Annabeth. The next issue was where to host the exchange. Someone suggested the park, but I quickly vetoed that idea. I had just gotten it cleaned up. The house wasn't going to let a whole school through the shield, so that was out. Sandy sent a message to Amaya asking what to do, and got a quick reply. Apparently the house could provide a door to a neutral area that would be just what we needed. There wouldn't be any exits into the main part of the house, but it would have all the amenities we required for the exchange. Sandy talked to the house, and a door appeared on the edge of the sidewalk. It was just a door, nothing else, and it looked unusual standing there on its own. It reminded me of the entrance to our locker room on the beach, so I wasn't surprised when we passed through and ended up in a large gym-like room. The place was really big, and there was plenty of room for all of us and the ring in the middle. We had restrooms, which were essential when there were this many people, as well as some empty tables and folding chairs. The space really was a gym, as one wall was mirrored, and it had punching bags, speed bags, and a couple of rubber dummies for striking or kicking. There were also some pads and boxing gloves on the side. Basically, the place had everything anyone would need to warm up for a match. The floor was made of that hard rubber they use in gyms, so it's easy to move on, and if you fall, you don't get hurt as bad. The ceiling went up at least 20 feet, so there's plenty of room to jump around or even fly. The ring was in the center of the room, and it was clearly the focus of the space. It was slightly smaller than the ring I fought in at the gathering, and the walls were already fixed in place. There wouldn't be any fancy maze option here. There were four walls, blah, blah, blah. There wouldn't be any fancy mage option here. There were 4 walls made up of some type of thick, clear material, and they weren't designed to move. It would do very well for us, as everyone could see the fight and yet remain protected from any projectile magic. It wasn't until I got closer to the ring that I noticed that there were actually 2 layers of walls surrounding the ring. I guess the outer wall was for the spectators, and the inner wall was to help protect the referee and the seconds from the fights. There were gaps in the walls, so it was easy to enter the ring and easy for the referee to jump in and stop the fight. There was an immediate rush to the restroom, as most of them needed to tap a kidney after their bus ride. After that, they started doing some stretches and warm-ups with the equipment. Ken and a few of his students came over to talk to Sandy and finalize any remaining details. They agreed that Tyler could serve as referee, as he was the only person here that was even remotely neutral. I think they were glad not to have him fighting on our side once they found out he was over 100 years old. It was agreed to give everyone 10 more minutes to finish up in the restrooms and get warmed up. Ken and the students seemed to be looking at us a lot, and he finally asked the question. Will your other students be joining us? I only ask as we can delay the exchange for a few minutes if we need more time. Thank you, but that won't be necessary, Sandy replied. We are all here. She waved at John, Annabeth, and myself. Oh, he looked at her sadly. How many students did you lose in the battle? I think he was trying to be supportive and empathetic, but Sandy just looked at him in surprise. Oh, We didn't lose anyone. This is our whole crew." Now it was their turn to look surprised. They all looked at each other like there was no way they could have heard correctly. "You defended your house with just the people that are present?" He sounded shocked. "Yeah," Sandy replied matter-of-factly. "We played defense and John played offense. He's a one-man army when he gets going." She left out the fact that I'd been injured and Tyler had helped, but they didn't need to know everything. Ken and his students stared up at John with a mixture of awe and trepidation. John played his part by looking at them with rock-solid fearlessness. His gaze evaluated them and found them wanting. He could snap their necks like twigs and still have time for second breakfast. "Yes, I'm sure he is," Ken said in awe. I don't know if they realized it, but they actually backed up a bit. I think if John had growled at him, they would have broken and run for their lives. John is such a gentle, caring soul with the heart of an artist, but right now he looked like he could drop a mountain on them. Even I was a little afraid. Thank goodness he was on my side. They quickly wished us well and went over to their own side. Sandy shared a glance with John, and I knew them well enough to know they were about ready to burst out laughing. They both held it in, though, and kept their game face on. Tyler moved into the center of the ring to look as impartial as possible, but not before sending me a supportive wink. I just smiled and winked back. Then I started warming up with Annabeth. We didn't do anything fancy, as we didn't want to give away our fighting style. Instead, we did some stretches, lunges, and jumping jacks. I felt good, but I was getting nervous butterflies in my stomach. As the youngest, I'd be fighting in the first match. I heard one of the students mention that it was nice the gym had some decoration, as this was such a guy's gym. I looked over and realized Aggie had joined us. This time he'd brought his glass stand with him, and he'd positioned himself in front of one of the mirrors so everyone could admire him from all angles. He traded out his delicate flowers for a huge display of tropical leaves and flowers. He'd gone for lots of height, texture, and color, and he looked very impressive. I pointed him out to Annabeth, and she stopped and ran over and gave him a big hug and ran over to give him a big hug and say hello. I was fighting first, so I didn't have time to do that. Instead, I felt for our connection and sent a big burst of happiness that he was here. I told him he was going to make Anna jealous if he kept looking so good. All too soon, the 10 minutes were up, and we all gathered by the ring to get the show on the road. With over 100 people, the group from Cincinnati ended up forming 3 lines on their side of the ring. With only 3 people, not counting Sandy, we didn't even remotely fill up our side. It was a very good thing this exchange wasn't dependent on body count, or we'd have lost before we even got started. We are gathered here today in a time-honored tradition to find peace through the trial of combat, Ken stated solemnly as he started the proceedings. The exchange of reconciliation is a way to test your strength, a way to find your center, and a way to find your own accord and move forward in this new supernatural life. Some of you are filled with sorrow. I invite you to bring that to the ring. Fight with the passion it inspires and leave it behind you. Sorrow is a healthy emotion, but left unchecked, it can fester and destroy your life. The same can be said of anger. Bring that to the fight. Fight with the passion it inspires, and then leave it behind. Reconciliation is possible for each of you today. My wish for all of us is that we leave here with a new hope and new clarity. For some of you, this is your first exchange. For some of you, this is a familiar experience. Regardless, I expect you to look at this with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective and learn as much as you can from it. I remind you to be on your best behavior today. Fight hard and fight well, but be aware of the referee in the seconds and stop immediately when your opponent yields. Any unsportsmanlike conduct or blows that land after the match is called will be dealt with harshly. Any fighting outside the ring will also be dealt with harshly. This is a reconciliation, not a brawl. He paused to glare at everyone, even our side. I just nodded in agreement. All that sounded good to me. I will not be yielding the fight for every scrape or bruise, but neither will I let a fight continue with a knockout or a broken bone. He looked at Sandy and Tyler, and they both nodded in agreement. Again, I wish for this to be a positive experience for both schools. So let's fight with passion and honor and see if we can part with an understanding of each other. Sandy, he stepped back and motioned for her to say her piece. I would like to thank you all for the unexpected opportunity today, Sandy said in a firm yet diplomatic voice. I've fought in battles before, but I have not had the opportunity to participate in something as structured and honorable as what we are attempting today. I don't think anyone in my house has. I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Hill and echo his sentiment. Let us find peace through combat, and may we all leave here today better mages and better people. She kept it short and simple. I like that. Soon it would be time for my fists to be doing the talking. T, are you ready? I asked. Of course, he replied. I make sure you are always ready. The entire grove is on high alert and standing by to assist you however you need. Thank you, T, I told him. Then I shifted my focus to Red. Red, are you ready? I'm ready. We're ready. We're so ready. He was so excited he was almost repeating himself. We got your back. We got your front. We got your top, your bottom, even your itchy bits. We just knock them out and we'll take care of the home team. I could feel the Hex network practically vibrating in excitement. I loved how enthusiastic they were, especially because they were protecting me. Thank you, Red, I sent, and then focused back on the room again. Apparently Ken had said a few more things, and now it was time for introductions for the first match. My youngest student today is Oliver. Ken gestured towards a middle-aged man at the end of the first row. He's only 2 years old, and he joined us last summer. We all clapped as he got to his feet and made his way into the ring. He was fairly overweight, and he moved like his joints were a bit stiff. He was a big guy, though, a couple inches over 6 feet and at least 250 pounds. My youngest resident today is Jason. Sandy went next and motioned to me. He is less than a year old and joined us a few months ago. I got to my feet as everyone clapped and started to head into the ring. Then I thought about how my clothes seem to get destroyed when I fight, and I quickly took off my shirt and threw it back to Annabeth. Then I thought about taking everything off, as I was low on underwear and shorts too, but that seemed a bit extreme for now. I walked through the opening into the two walls I walked through the opening in the 2 walls into the ring. I took a moment to look at the opposing team, and I was surprised to note that most of them looked supportive. I'm sure they were rooting for their guy, but it didn't look like they hated me or anything. Tyler called us both to the center and gave us his referee speech. I expect both of you to do your best and for us to have a good, clean fight. Remember that you can stop the match at any time by calling yield. If you cannot speak, you can tap the floor or your opponent. Don't tap once. Keep tapping until I acknowledge you and stop the fight. Also, remember that both of the seconds can also call the fight. He pointed to Sandy and Ken. If they yield the match, then it is over, regardless of your personal feelings. Do you both understand? I understand, I said, and looked up at Oliver. He was a big guy. I looked like a little pipsqueak next to him. He looked nervous, though, like really nervous. If I had to guess, this was his first match, and he wasn't ready for it. I understand, Oliver said. Then return to your side of the ring and face me, Tyler instructed. As I walked back to my side, Annabeth gave me a big, encouraging smile, and John gave me a double thumbs up. It hit me just how small our crew was, as Sandy was already in my corner and Tyler was the referee. I was almost back to my side when I saw Bermuda and Mr. Tubbles walk into the gym. They were moving slowly and looked completely unconcerned. I guess Bermuda figured I had this. I went to my side, turned, and summoned my battle energy. Water filled my lower half for smooth movement and stability. Smoke filled my upper half, as nothing could hurt smoke. I summoned lightning for my blocks and punches. I settled into my pigeon stance and waited. "Are you ready?" Tyler called, looking at me. "I'm ready," I replied firmly. "Are you ready?" Tyler asked Oliver. Oliver looked like he was going to wet his pants. "I'm ready," he said finally, as the school roared in support. "Fight!" Tyler declared and stepped back. I stepped forward and then stopped. I was curious to see what Oliver was going to do. He started waving his hands in a circle like he was a kung fu master trying to summon the wind. I could see magic starting to form and swirl, but it didn't look very powerful. He kept working at it though, and eventually he yelled, "Fireball!" and thrust his hands at me. I relaxed, ready to dodge, but the only thing that reached me was a warm breeze. There was no fire and certainly no ball. I waited, alert and ready to go, but Oliver stepped back and smiled. He was finished. I stayed ready as I couldn't believe Oliver was done. Finally, I had to accept the fact that the warm breeze was all he had. I was so shocked I wasn't sure what to do. Was this really what a normal 2-year-old mage was capable of? I looked at Ken to see if this was a joke, but he seemed pleased. They were both looking at me to see what I was going to do. Holy freaking cow. That was it. No wonder the Grand Matron had said that my fight with Eugene was like a kitten beating up a tiger. I thought about what I was going to do. I needed to do something. I didn't have any splashy magic to defeat him with. On the other hand, punching him seemed just cruel. Suddenly I had an idea. I turned to Annabeth. "Do you remember long ago we punched each other through a pair of phone books?" She nodded. "Do you still have them?" "Sure," she said cheerfully, hopping to her feet. "I'll go and get them." "Thank you," I called after her, and then turned to Oliver. "I can hit very hard," I said seriously. "I'd rather not punch you directly, as I would probably break something. Annabeth is going to get a couple of phone books that you can hold to your chest, and I'll punch you through that. It shouldn't hurt you, but you can feel what I'm capable of. If you decide to continue the match at that point, then we'll fight for real. However, my hope is that you will yield and save yourself some recovery time." He seemed completely at loss for words. He looked at me, looked at his teacher, looked back at me again. "We agreed to this slight delay," Ken spoke up, and Oliver looked relieved. I stood there, still ready in case either one tried anything, but nothing happened. Annabeth returned sooner than I expected, and she had both of the old phone books with her. She handed them to me, and I made sure not to step out of the ring as I took them. I didn't want to get disqualified. I didn't want that to disqualify me somehow. I approached Oliver and handed them to him. "Put them on your chest," I demonstrated for him. "Then brace yourself." He got into position, but his fingers were in the way. "You'll want to pull your fingers back," I told him. "If they get hit, they'll get hurt." He quickly moved them. With your permission, I bowed to him. I was being extra polite as I wanted him to save as much face as possible. This was supposed to be his resolution, and I didn't want to pound him into the ground and be all mean about it. I then looked at his teacher. With your permission, I bowed again. They both nodded, so I summoned the lightning. I flowed forward and punched him in the middle of the phone books. Together, they were at least 3 inches thick, so he had a good amount of padding. On the other hand, they were pretty solid, so the shock wave of the blow moved through them easily. I still wasn't used to punching with my new rune yet, as he flew backward like he'd been kicked by a mule. He hit the wall of the ring, and for a moment, he kept his feet. Then his legs gave way and he collapsed. Oh crap, I didn't mean to hit him that hard. He started gasping for air, and it quickly became obvious I'd knocked the breath out of him. That had happened to me lots of times in the arena, and it can be a scary feeling. Your lungs don't work right for a moment, and it feels like you're suffocating. We yield, Ken yelled quickly and ran over to help him. It took a few minutes, but Oliver got his breath back and finally got to his feet. He was still shaky, so a couple of his friends ran over and helped him back to his place in line. His eyes were wide as he gratefully sank down to the floor again. Everyone else was staring at me in shock. They were probably trying to reconcile my skinny frame and the amount of force I'd generated with my punch. I just bowed to Ken, then bowed to his school, and left the ring. I went to my spot by Annabeth and sat down on the floor beside her. "Show off," she said playfully. "I wanted to make a good impression," I smiled back. "Now it's your turn to charm them." Bermuda saw I had a lap open, so he sauntered over and cuddled up. I rubbed his ears and gave him kisses as the next match was introduced. "My next youngest student is Jared," Ken announced, motioning to the man beside Oliver. "He is 5 years old and also joined us last summer." Everyone clapped as he got to his feet and walked into the ring. He seemed a lot more assured than Oliver. He looked to be mid-20s, 6 feet, around 200 pounds. "My next youngest resident is Annabeth," Sandy declared and waved at Annabeth. "She is also less than a year old and has been with us for several months. She is a grandmother and the happiest person you will ever meet. I warn you not to underestimate her, though." Annabeth bounced to her feet with a happy smile and waved to everyone as she walked into the ring. Her smile was so infectious that most of Ken's students smiled and waved back. Tyler called both of them to the center, gave him his speech about fighting well, and then sent them back to their own sides. "Fight," he called, and stepped back. Jared started waving his arms like Oliver had, but this time it formed his spell much quicker. "Force bolt," he yelled and threw his magic at Annabeth. His bolt actually stayed together and looked like a real piece of magic. It didn't have a chance of doing any damage, though, as Annabeth easily pigeon-stepped around it. She waited, like I had, to see if he was going to do anything else. But that was it. That was all he had. I guess he was out of magic. They stared at each other for a few moments, and he didn't yield. "You seem like a nice guy, Jared," Annabeth told him, "but I'm going to save my magic for later. So let's do the phone books again, and you can decide if you want to fight me or not." Jared looked completely flabbergasted. He'd seen what skinny little old me could do, but at least I was a guy. Here was a little grandmother telling him that she was going to punch him out, and it was blowing his mind. She got the phone books, put them together, and generously helped him hold them correctly. "Ready, dear?" she asked sweetly. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. She followed my lead and looked over at Ken. "Are you ready, dear?" "Yes," he replied. Then he shook his head like he couldn't believe it was eyes and was trying to refresh the scene. Boom! Annabeth kai'd as she flashed into motion. Her punch hit Jared so hard he actually hit the wall of the ring and bounced forward again. She'd used her boom instead of her pow, so I guess she'd wanted to make a statement. Her message was received loud and clear as Jared spent the next several minutes learning how to breathe again and making sure his chest wasn't broken. When he finally staggered to his feet, he had his friends help him out of the ring too. Annabeth smiled, waved happily to everyone, gave them a nice bow, and they came back to sit by me. "Show off," I said playfully, echoing her earlier comment. "I wanted to make a good impression," she replied, echoing mine. "I think you certainly did that," I laughed. "They are scared of you now. The good news is that it's going to make our next battles a lot easier." I didn't realize how right I was. We continued working our way down the first line of students, and all of them demonstrated a small bit of magic. But then they were excited and eager to be hit through the phone books. It was like they couldn't believe our punches were real, and they just had to experience it for themselves. It seemed like the women were anxious to get hit by me, and a few of them flirted the whole way through the match. The men all wanted to get hit by Annabeth. Getting leveled by a little greenie totally made their day. I say all the men wanted Annabeth, but two of them wanted to get hit by me. One was a really big guy that wanted to experience getting hit as hard as possible. The other was a really cute gay guy, and he flirted with me the whole time. He also couldn't stop looking at my abs. I made sure to slowly bend over and pick something up from the floor. I gave him a match and a show. Tyler just rolled his eyes at my display and he was trying not to laugh. I angled myself so he had a good view and then picked something up for him too. I was being a little naughty and it was so much fun. Annabeth and I had a wonderful time with the whole first row, and they seemed to enjoy their matches with us as well. It really helped their mood when John left for a while and then came back with a whole bunch of homemade brews. We soon created a flow where they got punched, recovered, and then got a nice cold brew when they sat down. A couple of mages in the other two rows asked for beer, but John said they had to have their matches first. It was pure genius because it soon became clear they couldn't wait to get their fight over with. When we started on the second row, the tenor of the matches changed a bit. We started facing mages that were over 30 years old, and they had real magical capacity and experience in using it. They weren't just content to throw a spell, get hit, and get a beer. They wanted a real match. So Annabeth and I gave it to them. I still didn't feel like I was in danger, so I let them throw their spells and have their moment. If I thought it would ruin my clothes, I dodged the spell. If not, I let it hit me so I could test Red and his hex network. Red was having a ball and wanted to take all the spells. I told him he probably would have plenty of fun once we started on the back row. Once we fought a bit, I let the mage decide if they wanted to get hit through the phone books or go for real. I had a few mages that thought they could handle it, and they wanted to get hit for real. I didn't want to really hurt them, so I punched their arms a few times and they quickly surrendered. The whole event soon had a party feel. The beer was flowing and the people were laughing and talking. John left our side of the ring and sat down with the mages who had already fought. Now they didn't have to worry about fighting him, and he was handing out beer. He didn't seem so intimidating anymore. Once the ice was broken, Annabeth and I followed his lead and got to know the school between our fights. They seemed like a nice group of people, and we were invited multiple times to come up to Cincinnati and spend some time with them. Everything was going well until we started fighting the mages in the back row. Then the party came to a screeching halt. And that is the subject for our next reading next Sunday. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will read to you again soon. Take care.